I don't know, Carl. Using notes for a video? I mean, this seems a little bit on the nose. I'm just afraid it's going to come off as too coherent, and that's not really my thing. Hi, and welcome to another video lecture by yours truly, with some help from Carl, he's not really that important, and of course my friend Ivan. Today, we're going to explore the relationship between faith and doubt from a theological perspective. The first thing that we're going to do is define the word faith, because it's a bit more complicated than sometimes people assume. Second, we'll try to consider why faith and doubt are often seen as antithetical to one another. Finally, we'll explore the possibility that not only is doubt not antithetical to faith, that it may actually be a vibrant part of it. So, to the first point, defining faith. People often reduce faith to a very simplistic definition of believing. However, as our author Alister McGrath has noted, it's a bit more complicated than that. From a historical perspective, McGrath knows three different dimensions of faith. First, faith does in fact have a component of believing in ideas. Consider the Apostles' Creed. I believe in God, the creator of everything. But faith also has a component of trusting in someone, particularly in this case, trusting in God. Consider Jesus' claim on the cross, "Into your hands I commit my spirit." The idea is that even in the midst of this crushing experience, Jesus places his trust in his God. Finally, faith includes the idea of acting out. That is to say, acting as if what you believed in were true. It might be important to note here that the Greek word for faith, pistis, can actually mean both faith and faithfulness. And the faithfulness aspect of the term is what I mean by acting out faith. That is, it's not merely just believing or just trusting, but living as one who believes and trusts. In this sense, we have a definition of faith that has a couple different components to it. Accepting certain ideas are true, placing our trust in another, in this case God, and acting upon both those beliefs and that trust in our lives. Given this definition of faith, it's not difficult to see why many people would consider faith and doubt antithetical. If faith is about belief, then how can we doubt what we believe and still be faithful? If faith is about trust, then how can we doubt or question the one in whom we've chosen to place our trust? Finally, if faith is about action, how can we act upon a faith that doubts and questions? That is to say, how can we act when we are uncertain about the reasons for which we are acting? This begins to help us to see why people might think faith and doubt don't really coalesce. If you're faithful, you don't doubt. If you're faithful, you don't question. You certainly don't question God. But there's a problem with this idea. The problem is that people that we consider to be paragons of faith often doubt and ask questions. One pressing example from modern history is Mother Teresa. Here's a person who chose to put her trust in God, who believed the things that were written in the Creed, and who certainly acted out her life as one who believes and trusts. Her work among the poor is almost incomparable when you look at it next to what other Christians have done. And yet, Mother Teresa clearly had doubts. Some of her personal correspondences with others suggested that she felt tortured by her doubt. She felt a complete absence of God. She very much believed that God loved others, but she felt that God had somehow abandoned her. She felt nothing. In one correspondence, she said to a trusted friend, "Jesus has a very special love for you, but as for me, the silence and emptiness is so great that I look and do not see, listen and do not hear." Is it then possible that faithfulness and doubts and questions are quite compatible with one another? Well, we might respond that perhaps Mother Teresa is an outlier among the faithful. Yes, she had questions and doubts, but most of the faithful do not. They believe without hindrance. The problem with this view is that's not really the case. And we don't have to go to the examples of modern day saints to know this. We can go back to the actual examples from the Bible. Some of the people that we consider to be the most faithful characters in the Bible really do question God frequently and have their doubts. As one example, Abraham, who is known for his faithfulness to God because he trusted God when God asked him to leave his land and go to another land, questioned God when he heard about God's plan to destroy the city of Sodom. He began to bargain with God. If I can find some righteous people down there, will you spare the city? And the reason behind Abraham's bargaining is a simple question that he asked God. Will not the judge of the universe do what is just? Just imagine that for a moment. God tells you, I'm going to do this act. I'm going to destroy these people. And rather than say, okay, you're God, I'm not, your will be done, you say, well, wait a second. Aren't you the judge of the universe? Aren't you going to do what is just? That's a very strong question to ask God. But Abraham isn't alone in this endeavor. Moses, when he is in Egypt, accuses God of abandoning the people and in some sense being no better than Pharaoh in the way that he treats the people. After the people are delivered from Egypt, there's a very famous story about the people growing impatient while Moses is talking to God on Mount Sinai. The people become so impatient that they decide to try to make a god for themselves, the narrative of the golden calf. So they melt down all their jewelry and built this golden calf and say, hey, this is our God. In mid-conversation with Moses, God says, all right, never mind, leave me alone. I'm going to destroy this people. They're stiff-necked, they're stubborn, they're disobedient, they're already worshiping other gods. I'm going to destroy all of them, and then I'll make a new people out of you, Moses. Again, the idea here is that the faithful person would trust God. Okay, God, you know what you're doing. I trust your decisions here. But that's not what Moses does. Moses actually debates God on the matter and says, you promised Abraham and his descendants that you would take care of this people, that they would be your people. And also, why should the Egyptians think that you brought all the people out of Egypt just to slaughter them in the desert? You need to change your mind. And in fact, Moses says that as an imperative. Change your mind. Relent from your anger. The interesting thing about this narrative is God's response. The text says that God actually relented or repented, depending on how we translate the Hebrew, of the evil or the harm that he had planned to bring upon the people. This is fascinating. Not only did Moses question God, not only did Moses debate God, Moses got God to change God's mind. We can find similar questions against God in other books of the Bible, for example, the Psalms. In the 44th Psalm, the author laments how the people of Israel have suffered and struggled. Typically in this case, the author would say, well, we must have done something wrong. However, in verses 18 and 19, the author says, our heart has not turned back, nor have our steps departed from your way. Yet you have broken us in the haunt of jackals, and covered us with deep darkness. What's really fascinating about this claim is that the author is accusing God of not being faithful to the covenant that God has made. Israel is keeping up their end of the bargain, but God is not keeping up God's end of the bargain. And as a side note, there are few things you could accuse God of that are more damning than being unfaithful to the covenant. In light of this accusation, the author actually challenges God. Rise up, sleep no more. You have to come and fix this. We can also discuss the book of Lamentations, which is also filled with questions and doubts about God's faithfulness to the covenant and God's relationship to the people. Another great example is the prophets. Many times we think of prophets as people who predict the future. However, if you look at the biblical prophecy, more often than not, the prophets are actually trying to change the future. That is, when they go to the people, they say, God has said you're going to be destroyed. However, if you repent, then perhaps God will change God's mind and spare you. And when the prophet speaks to God, oftentimes they say, God, please relent from your plan to destroy the people. Abraham Heschel, a Jewish rabbi and one of the leading authors on the prophets, has written, more often than not, the prophet does not say to God, thy will be done, but rather, thy will be changed. Consider that again. The faithfulness of the prophets, the one that God has chosen to be God's spokesperson, as it were, to the people, often are willing to question God, to doubt God's plan, and to ask God to change God's plan. Even Jesus, our Messiah, and according to the Creed, God, the second person of the Trinity, has a moment like this with his Father. On the cross, Jesus does say things that denote trust. Into your hands I commit my spirit. However, he also makes another claim that denotes doubt and questioning. He quotes from the 22nd Psalm, which itself is a weird juxtaposition of questioning and trust. Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me? The importance of this accusation suggests that even God, incarnate, can question or doubt God. Why have you forsaken me? The point I would like you to consider is that all of these examples suggest that faith and doubt and faith and questioning God are not antithetical to one another. In fact, the willingness to doubt, the ability to question God, might be a sign of a truly vibrant faith, because it's a sign of a genuine relationship. It's not just one-sided. Yes, God, whatever you say, I'm on board. In a very real relationship, it's a willingness to say, no, I have a part to play in this relationship as well. I have things I think, things I want to say. And God seems to be, in the biblical narrative, very open to these kinds of doubts and these kinds of questions. And so this is your prompt for this week. How do we think about the relationship between faith and doubt? How do we balance our trust in God with the ability to question God? How do we balance our belief in the creedal statements of the church with a willingness to challenge some of those ideas when they don't seem to make as much sense? And finally, how, like Mother Teresa, do we actually live out a faith when we are riddled with doubt and confusion about that faith? These are the things I want you to think about this week. I'm looking very forward to reading your post. I've very much enjoyed what I've read so far. In the meantime, why don't you take a few moments and enjoy this video of my son learning how to do magic with a wand. Mischief managed. Yeah. Show me how you get it to light up. What do you say? Lumos. Lumos. What are you holding?
Wand. I spell word. And D.
Are you spelling words with your wand?
I spell dog.
How do you spell it?
Like a D.
Like a D.
Lumos.